Hey, this is the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hey friend, hope you're having an amazing day. You look amazing today. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts. You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So join us as we change the world and make it a better place. I'm super excited for today's episode. I'm here with my friend Wade Chumney. He is a professor of business ethics. He's an author of a really cool book called Conscious Business Ethics. He's an expert in this field and someone that I'm pretty excited for this conversation. So welcome, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a wonderful new year, and I'm excited to be talking.
So let's just kind of dive into this thing. I'd love to hear about your book, but maybe we can talk about, maybe let's frame the book and then we can talk about your journey to writing the book and what kind of, because you brought so much cool stuff together in this book. I mean, there's so many really interesting concepts that sandwiched is maybe the wrong word. I'd call them, it's kind of like a gumbo or something. I don't know. It's really, it's a really cool angle. It's kind of a fresh perspective on this. And I'd love to hear how you birthed it.
Well, thank you. That's a very kind words. I really appreciate that. And interesting that you mentioned gumbo. We just got back from celebrating New Year's in New Orleans, where
oh wow,
the specialty. So there you go. But so I've been teaching business ethics for nearly 20 years, and as I've taught longer and longer and gotten more into it, I started to realize like ethics is really important. It's ethics is how you choose to live your life. So once that really hit me, and I realized I've got these students that are learning from me to go out into the world and attempt to make it a better place, just as you do. I started to, say, well, all the stuff I'm reading, what if we synthesize this to make it a little more approachable, a little more synthetic,
right?
and something that the students can actually grasp, and business people can grasp and put into practice. And that's the whole point of everything I write, everything I do, is to try to make it practical. A lot of theories out there, a lot of, people talk about stuff all high and mighty, but it doesn't really matter if it doesn't get put into the actions that you take in the real world. So that was the kind of the motivation that got me to the point of writing this book, and teaching this conscious business ethics approach, which is an amalgamation, a combination of various approaches to ethics that people have used over the years, but it puts them into a concise package. In fact, something that you could fit in the palm of your hand, a diagram, something you can wear on your T-shirt. So it's been really exciting, and I've seen the impact it's had on those that I've taught, and that's the most rewarding aspect of it.
So, I mean, a business ethics book or an ethics book is not like a new thing, but you have a new angle on it, which I think is interesting. When you looked at the landscape, and maybe you didn't even think about it this way, but like when you looked out at the landscape of what else was out there, what did you see was lacking?
Right. Okay. So what I saw was lacking was a synthesis. What I saw was people talk about these normative ethical theories, deontology, utilitarianism, virtue ethics. Like, okay, there's some theories out there, but no one ever combined them into a simple practical package that makes sense for an
Mm-hmm.
individual to take and put into practice in their own life whatever context they find themselves, especially a business context. So I took everything I could find in terms of virtue ethics as the approach to how to live a good life, starting with Socrates, and then combine that with systems thinking from Acoff, and combine that with Kohlberg's moral development. And they all say the same thing. They all have these 7 stages. I mean, it was fascinating to me to find this out in my research that they correlate. They say the same thing, but
Mm-hmm.
no one's ever put it together. And so once you see the synthesis of these different approaches, to me, it makes a lot of sense. If what Plato said, nearly 2,500 years ago, is matched up with modern science in the form of positive psychology and supported by systems thinking from, Russell Ackoff and others, then maybe we should paying attention to this. And there's a simple methodology that you can put into practice presented here, that makes it effective.
Um, you know, I was kind of struck by, I mean, it's almost like ethicists like writing books for like other ethicists or something,
Right.
Not that like everyone's an idiot walking around, but like putting it into terms that we can do something with is really how we're going to start to make change. I
Yeah.
saw this quote on Twitter or something that, it said like, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And it's like so simple, but so true. You know, we have to do something that's a little bit different, or we have to put some different energy out in the world, or we have to take some different steps if we ever expect something, you know, the world to change around us. And at one level, it's so changeable, which is great. And at the other level, we have to change in order to drive that change, which makes it hard. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I mean, it's like the quote from Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the
Right.
world. You and I and every human being who has a desire needs to take it upon ourselves to make these changes, to want them, and to try. I mean, simply is the simplest way to put it is to make the world a better place.
Right.
That's your mission, make the world a better workplace. It's the same thing.
Right.
It's simply about doing the right thing, doing good. And the way what I explain in my book that I think most people don't realize is being good and doing the right thing, not just being a goody goody and, getting brownie points and all that. Your life actually is a better experience when you do
Right.
those things. That's what is undebatable. That's what all the wisdom traditions, all the religious traditions, all the, intelligent human beings that have graced our planet over the last thousands of years
Right.
have said, and it's not wrong. But the message of and at the core of all those things is ethics, doing the right thing. And too many people just don't grasp that, and they chase materialism, consumerism, whatever, these things that are out there, which are the norms of society. But you don't need to be normal. You need to go beyond that, and it's a personal choice, and you can do whatever you want with your life. So why not choose to head toward an ideal? Why not choose to have that ideal life experience and make the world a better place at the same time? That's a win-win, and that's the whole point in what I'm trying to accomplish.
It's this, I mean, the world is such a crazy thing because it's like we spend our lives like realizing and turning light bulbs on that have been turned on by our forefathers. And it's just like this perpetual cycle.
Yeah.
It's like if we can help turn those light bulbs on a little bit earlier in the lives of sort of everybody, then maybe we can maybe make the place actually better, you know?
Yes.
But it's such a crazy like environment that we're in right now. There's so much stimulus. There's so much, I mean, we're just bombarded with negativity and we're bombarded with all these things and like this hopelessness actually. And I don't know if I'm just getting older or I'm just kind of noticing this more because of the position I'm in, but like the level of like low agency thinking that I see around me seems to be higher than it's maybe than I've ever like imagined it to be. You know, the low agency thinking being, kind of shorthand for, well, the world is just going to happen to me versus that kind of high agency. Well, I'm an agent of change in the world, or I can be one way or another, and I can really drive some like meaningful things forward. Where do you think that started to slip? Like, where did you like, or I mean, do you even think I'm right? And how do you look at that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you're correct depending on which context you're looking at.
Yeah.
In the business context, which is a subtext, of the context of life. I mean, business is one component. There's lots of other contexts in your life. That thinking, seems to be more prevalent in the business world, and
Mhm.
you talk about a light bulb. That's the cover of my book is a
Yeah.
light bulb going on, um, that's illumination. That's the realization that life is what you make it, that you're in charge. You have a choice. And you talked about low agency and people, the world's what it is, blah, blah, blah. That's such a sad way to
Hmm.
go through life when in actuality we all are incredibly powerful.
Right.
And it's a choice to engage that power, take it forward, and do something that benefits the world at the same time benefiting yourself, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's there's two sides to everything, an inside and an outside.
Hmm.
And what gets neglected in business education is the inside. I can tell you that for sure. There's lots of external models and theoretical concepts, all these things out here. Well, guess what? None of that stuff matters unless the inside decides to do something about it. So you've got to focus on this um, development, self-development, learning. How do you go about, if you want to make the world a better place, how does the world really work? There's the first question. What's the truth out there? How does reality work? And I think a simple in my book, the way I explain it, the simplest way is it's a system. We're all part of a larger system. There's a smaller system inside of us. But once you see the system dynamic take place at all these various levels, you realize, wow, the whole world is a bunch of interrelated systems. And so that's the truth of it. So realizing that, how do you get to the principles, the guiding, overarching concepts that allow that system to function as ideally as possible, to function as well as it can. And that's when you get to the things that virtue ethics talks about, like the six virtues, positive psychology talks about. And those are the things that you put into practice in your own life so that you can create those types of better world experiences for yourself and others.
So you mentioned that, business education is almost sort of, totally devoid of a lot of what we're talking about right now. It's very theoretical. It's very sort of frameworks based. It's all kind of outside based. Do you think it's always been that way? Do you think there's been like a breaking apart of like learning from the inside and, versus the outside? Like what's going on with that whole, dynamic?
Right. I think that's been the operating paradigm for many, many decades, at least, maybe centuries, maybe century. But what I find rewarding and joyous is the fact that there are cutting edge like breakthroughs of light bulbs going on. There are approaches to business that are enlightening. Things like positive organizational studies at the University of Michigan. They've got a whole center devoted to. I went to the conference this past summer where they're making organizations a positive place to help human beings develop and grow, which makes the workplace better, makes their lives better.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Laszlo is doing some work with consciousness in terms of that in a work environment, and I just see so many things that are cutting edge that are coming. And I guess the way I kind of look at it is, here's your future. Your
Right.
future is ethics, period. If you don't ingrain ethics in your organization, the world's not going to be as ideal a place as it is today. That's the bottom line. So ethics is your future. It's my future. It's all of our futures. And again, ethics is simply being a good person. I mean, the book talks about ways to make that practical, but being a good person is at the base of every religion, at the base of every wisdom tradition. It's been around forever, like you talked about. And it's a matter of getting those light bulbs to turn on earlier. That's why I love teaching undergraduates in the business school, because that's an age when you're very receptive, you're learning and
Right.
growing, and you've got a chance to make a huge impact. These students go out and start their own businesses, entrepreneurship. They can start exactly where they want to start if they're entrepreneurs. They don't have to go into another system, a culture that they need to be a part of and then
Yeah.
work their way to change it. So that's a lot of dynamic positives I see in the business ethics education field at this point in time.
Why are we having this conversation now? Like, why is it now the time for us to take kind of hold of this ethical opportunity, not only in ourselves or our societies, but particularly in our businesses?
Well, business is the most powerful force on the planet, or at least one of them. The amount of power that they have is amazing. So the simplest way to approach this is to take those businesses and then turn them toward an intention of good, of making the world a better place in in the context of their business operations. And that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
You can make that change. You can make that shift. And the business have so many people employed and such resources and all this that they can make a significant difference much more quickly and much more effectively than an individual can on their own. So that's why I think it's so important now is the amount of power that businesses have amassed, given the
Mm-hmm.
way our systems work. And they're at a point where they can do that. They can take off and accomplish those things. And that's why we're having this conversation now is because of that factor. And also the fact that, look at the world, as you talked about, the negativity, the downsides, all these things that are weighing on people,
Right.
I feel so it just makes me feel so sad inside for the younger generation and how they things they hear about the world and all this stuff. And I just want to swipe all that away and say, look, I don't care what all that stuff going on isn't you. You have the choice in how you choose to live your life and what you
Right.
choose to do about it.
And
So
and what you choose to
y-
fixate on, what you choose to focus
yeah,
on,
yes,
because there's a
your
thousand
attention.
other stories that are reinforcing exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I tell anyone, people I advise or my students, your attention is your most valuable asset. Your
Hmm.
attention. What you focus on is what you're going to create your belief system, which is going to affect your perspective, how you view the world. And so focus wisely. And what we have going on today with artificial intelligence, which is unbelievable change agent in
Yeah.
society is, these algorithms running our lives in a sense. And those algorithms, without us even thinking, are telling us what to watch, what to see. And the thing about those algorithms is it's always what's most important is what's the intention behind you? What's your intention? What's my
Right.
intention? What's that algorithm's intention? Its intention is to maximize the amount of attention you give it and then monetize it. That's not the most ideal intention to have, you know?
Right.
So you need to think about what do I intend and what do I put out there in terms of these algorithms and this artificial intelligence? What's the intention behind it? Because as you know, everything out there is just a tool for the human beings that put it into practice. So that's why I always go back to the human being as they create the systems we find ourselves in. They create the artificial intelligence. It's all up to us to make those choices and how we use these tools to get to where we want to go.
That's a pretty interesting frame that your most valuable asset is your attention. When you look at, when I look at my life right now, it is like, I mean, my attention is like all over the place, and I'm doing some things to try to focus more and try to like drown out the noise, but like we're just bombarded with it like nonstop. And to your
Yeah.
point, there are these systems built by human beings who recognize that man, if I can get some of that attention, then I can begin to monetize it. It's just crazy how that tail has started to wag the sort of like global dog. Like whatever, 20, 30 years ago, our parents didn't have to deal with this sort of like attention leeching that
Yeah.
we are like, it's like we're just like living in a swamp and there's like attention leeches all over us or something.
Absolutely. And that attention, you the key realization is that you have the power to focus that attention where you choose.
Right.
Most of us just give that up. Ooh,
Yeah,
TikTok,
totally.
you swipe it. I mean, nothing good, nothing good, but it's just your attention's taken from you and it's taken by these algorithms and they have psychologists and psychiatrists hired on board to figure out how to make it as effective as possible to grab that attention. So
Right.
my advice would be to, get your attention, grab a hold of that thing and realize the value of that. And then judiciously choose where you want to focus that. I mean, there's lots of stimuli coming in, but the same thing that you talk about, and everyone does, all the negatives out there, there's just as many positives. All the wisdom traditions are now available online that
Great
you can
point.
go and find anything you want. So the issue is not the fact that we're drowning in this negativity, it's the fact that you're not you, but
Yeah.
each of us are not choosing to focus our attention on the valuable things that are available to us.
Right.
The internet gives us everything we could ever hope to find out about if we want to elevate ourselves and engage the world in a better way. But it's easier, and the system isn't designed, isn't set up to help us do that. We have to make that choice on our own. And then once we do that, we realize the benefits, then we can put it into practice and be a change agent for others.
Right. Um, I don't know. It's so interesting. There's all these massive innovations, but then what come along with them are all these, negative externalities or all these unintended consequences that make it sort of equally difficult to achieve the benefits, the potential benefits that the technology, provides. Right. In
Right.
spreadsheets, like, I've used this example before, but I don't know, 100, 200 years ago, there obviously wasn't spreadsheets, but there was still M&A going on. So they got down to a level of, comfortability that they had to make the bet that they were making to buy this company or sell this company at this price, right?
Yeah.
And now you have this ability now to build a massive financial model with multiple tabs and all that kind of stuff. And what comes along with that is this, you can get too detailed and you can spend too much time in that. And you can think that this model is actually going to be a picture of the real world when I can tell you, I've never seen a financial model that's actually ever been accurate. The only thing you can
Yeah.
count on is that's what's not going to happen. So, I mean, there's 1,000 other, probably a million other examples of kind of what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
if you
And
don't
that's
guard against those like negativities or those potential negativities, then you can get into that, that doom scrolling trap of just, 2 hours later, you're like, man, what did I just
yeah.
ingest? You know what I mean?
Right. And what you ingested is gonna form the belief, it's gonna
Totally,
create the way
totally,
you view the world.
totally.
But you talk about, a map is not the territory. Anything you create is not the real world. It is a simulation of it. It is an attempt to minimize it so that it's understandable and usable, but it's not the real world. It's
Right.
missing out on tons of things. It always will, always. So you have to realize the limitations of models that you create when reality is out there doing its thing. Reality, you're not going to change. I mean, I just an example, but there was a fire. The Thomas fire came. I moved out to California in 2014, and this massive fire I'd never seen in my life. I lived in the Southeast my whole life before this, and this massive fire came within a football throw of my house, and it was absolutely earth-shaking. I can't, the feelings that you cannot change.
Mhm.
Nature is going to do what
Right.
nature does. The reality will happen, and you're just going to have to comply.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the bottom line. And that's the point too of this conscious business ethics approach that I talk about is if you want to be ethical, if you want to live a good life, if you want to experience a more ideal experience of life, then you need to get in alignment with the system of which you're a part, which operates on these principles of, of well-being, of working together, a synthetic living system of which you are a part. Hoarding wealth in different pockets is not how a system, raises and gets better. Evolution hasn't doesn't work that way. It works in a symbiosis where things are working together to move up toward an ideal. And on an individual level, if you align yourself with those laws of the universe, laws of nature that are out there, that's when you flow, when you have alignment, when
Right.
things work for you. And that's what the text is trying to demonstrate.
So, I mean, what do you say to someone so let me back up. What you're saying is true. That's how, water will naturally flow down a hill. If you lose circulation in your body, then that limb could have to be amputated because that limb is going to die. That's sort of a corollary to the hoarding of resources or the sort of synthetic impediments that are placed within some sort of these structures and systems and stuff like that. A business in and of itself is something, I don't want to say it's artificial. It's not artificial. It's not natural. It's not a natural thing, right? Uh,
Yeah.
it's it's governed by its own laws, so to speak, its own processes and procedures and all those kinds of things, which makes it because it's not natural. It's easier. This is my kind of belief. It's easier for it to act in a sort of a way that's out of harmony. So that, I think that's kind of the root of like a lot of these toxic cultures that we're talking about and these bad business practices and the black heart of corporate America, that whole machine thing that chews up people and spits them out and dehumanizes them and looks at folks like human labor units and all that kind of stuff. With that sort of framework in place, assuming you think my ramblings are at least a little bit coherent. Like, what do you say to somebody that's inside a large organization? I mean, while this large organization can provide, this hypothetical faceless large organization can't provide the opportunity to make this big positive impact in the world because it, on average, has a lot more power than its counterpart would have had 200 years ago or something like that. It may have a bunch of like overhangs of other sort of positive or negative externalities that somebody needs to sort through. Where do you tell someone to start? How does someone who reads your book or is in this place that they can really drive some really big change forward, like where do they start? Like how do they start actually like being that light in the darkness?
Right. So the first thing that you realize is that an organization, any organization, it's a system. As you talk about, artificial. It's a system. It's a subset of the larger system within which we live. I mean, it's a reality. It's a smaller subset. So there's all kinds of smaller subsets, smaller systems. There's the system of work. There's the system of school. A whole bunch of different systems are out there operating with their own principles and their own methodologies and how things operate. And what you and I and everyone else does is when we go into these different systems, we take on a different role.
Right.
You're a CEO now. Oh, you're a dad when you get home. You're not, your mindset is not the same. You
Right.
have shifted because your role has shifted. Um, Ethics would say, which is a big thing to swallow, but you should have consistency. You should have integrity. There should not be various faces you put on
Right.
or ways you
Five
act in
different
different.
versions of me or
Yeah,
something.
there's
Right.
one version of you, and it should be consistent in all areas. People that go to work and act like a jerk and do all this stuff and excuse it because it's business and come home and act totally different. That's not that's not how it works. It's
Right.
it's that consistency. So I think the realization that you're one person on this planet is a good start, and that you need to engage all the systems you operate within with the same approach. being a good person, you know what that means. And so if you do that as a father, do that as a CEO, do that as a teacher, do that in all these different areas, all the things start to work together. You start to see the benefits that flow from that. And if someone's not operating at that, um, I guess, mindset,
Frequency or something. Yeah.
yeah, frequency, whatever you want to say, they don't even believe it or know it to be real. They've
Right.
never experienced it. And here's one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard. You don't know what you don't know. There's never been a truer statement made. If you've never experienced it and never tried, you have no idea what it's like to
Mhm.
be a good person, to experience doing sharing goodwill and trying to make the world a better place and how that feels and how people treat you and the things that generate from that. You just don't know it. And therefore, many people believe it just doesn't exist. This is my reality, right? This is what I see. Well, you gotta you've got to have a belief of opening up your mind. You open your mind so that you're able to receive these different perspectives. We all have our own perspective on life, but those are just individual perspectives, right? There's the reality is an amalgamation of all those
Right.
perspectives. So you've got to be willing to realize you don't know what you don't know, which I think Socrates said a quote a little different than that, but something to that effect. And if you really grab a hold of that, believe that, then you start to realize, wow, I got a lot to learn here. This is fun. I can engage life as a learning endeavor. The world is like the teacher, your external environment, and you're the student. That's how to approach life if you want to grow and develop and become a better person and then share that with others. And it makes life fun, it's a enjoyable way to go through it. But it takes the realization that you don't know what you don't know, and the willingness to focus your attention on those things that will bring benefit to you. Tear that away from that technology that's sucking it away every second of your life and bring it back to yourself,
Right.
and then choose where you want to head on your own. That's kind of the central power.
So I love doing this podcast because I get to talk to really interesting people like you. And some of my favorite episodes are when I'm talking to someone who is, they're just like on fire. Like you can tell when someone is like doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Oh,
And you can tell when someone is, I don't know, not, you can tell when the shoe fits, when someone's walking with shoes that fit them, so to speak. Um, how did you get to this point? Because you were a young guy at some point, and you're still a young guy. But I'm saying when you were a boy,
yeah.
I'm sure you weren't thinking I'm going to write a business ethics book one day, and that's the path that I'm going on. How did you kind of fall into this ethics pool? Tell me that story on how you went from how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, and thank you very much. That's really kind of you to say, and I feel that to be the
Yeah.
truth, that I really am right where I need to be doing exactly what I wanna do, and I'm very fortunate, to but that the fortune, the good luck, all those things, that happens when you do the right thing. I mean,
Right.
that's the point.
Yeah.
Do the right thing and things come into place. But, what led me to this point yeah, I didn't have those ideas as a kid. I mean, I grew up in a little town called Hanahan, South Carolina, 18 years in the same house and, 20,000 people, in the South and just it was a different world, and I never really fit into that culture, I guess. I mean, I was a part of it, but I just always kind of thought for myself, I guess, is the thing and just was never just going with what the normal system was.
Hmm.
And, I went to a little school called Davidson College and went to UVA Law School and had some great education. Both of those were phenomenal experiences. And what I enjoyed about Davidson, I think it's a liberal arts college, 1,400 students when I went there. And I tell my 18-year-old just the other day who's going to UCLA, I was like, look, the best thing that happened in my educational experience was the liberal arts, learning all about these various areas because again, reality is subsetted into all these
Yeah.
various disciplines and silos. Well, guess what? The only way to get reality is to take all those silos and kind of break them apart and see how they fit together.
Hmm.
And that's what I did in this book. That's what ethics is the realization that there's these various components out there, but no one's ever really put them together
Right.
in a package that is understandable and you can put into practice. So, but I didn't have any of these ideas, but I got into being a professor because I loved, again, my teachers at Davidson, I thought were really high quality. And I just enjoyed like learning from them. And I thought, I can do this. And once I realized I could, I got a teaching job. And like I said, I've been doing it for about 20 years. But I didn't start off with the understanding with, you have to experience something to know it. I was just teaching business ethics and law and these other technology classes. I have a master's in information systems as well. But I started as I came over here to Cal State Northridge, where I teach now, in 2014. I really started to focus on, you know, how do I make a difference? What's going on here? I've been teaching these texts all these years. Is there a better way to do this? Is there, it seems like it could be. And then I started to realize ethics is how you live your life. That central premise is like, what could be more important than that? Like, I'm teaching the most important class in their entire college education, in
Yeah,
my mind, how you choose to live your life.
totally.
So I better figure out how to teach it effectively and how to do it well. And so I started, for 5 years probably, I taught my students these concepts and got feedback and learned. They taught me as much as I taught them.
Yeah.
And then it got to a place where it could actually be placed into a text, and that's the result that came about. But it's about like, I enjoy my job. I have fun. I love teaching. I
Yeah, I
love
can
the
tell.
engagement, and it's the best job in the world for me. And once I've put the book out, I start to realize I can spread this knowledge, this that I put together, to businesses, consult with them, show them how to do it in their culture, and take it beyond simply these 18 to 22-year-olds out into a larger context.
It's a really fun thing that you're doing. It's a feel good thing for sure, but it also like does good, and
Right.
it
Just like
actually helps
you.
people do well as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Um,
just like you. I mean, it's the same thing, we're doing things to make the world a better place, better workplace.
right.
And it feels good. I mean, that's pretty
Well, I mean, it's
remarkable.
definitely more fun. I mean, my dad told me, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right, and I didn't never really
Yes.
kind of got it until I've like kind of spent time doing it the other way, where it's like it's better. It's just better to do it that way. And a good culture is a lot better to be a part of. A good family culture is a lot more fun to be a part of, and it
Yes.
produces better results. A
Yes.
good business culture is better to be a part of. I mean, it's definitely hard. As you look at, I mean, we're at this really interesting point. We're at this really interesting point with business culture, I think, right now, because there's like, I don't know. I mean, in the 1920s, when there were like, kids falling into manufacturing machines, nobody had like culture sessions. I can't imagine that they did.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about it, and it's like part of a conversation. And there's at least, maybe these are the early signs of what I hope, and I think you'd probably agree. I hope is the era that we're stepping into, where it's truly authentic, and we're talking, they're truly, high integrity businesses, high integrity cultures that aren't just paying lip service to values. I mean, there's never going to be a perfect, company, of course, but like where it's real. I think the early
Yeah.
signs of it that we're seeing are a lot of, to use a shorthand, like the glossy codes of conduct. Those are, corporate documents that at least are words on a page, describing the type of culture that they want it to be. Many times you hear people talk about this massive gulf, or this gap between what they're experiencing and what those words on the page say. But I'm just saying, I don't know, old manufacturing companies probably didn't have, even those words on the page, right? So it's
Right.
starting, but this gap, at this time where I think we're really tuned into inauthenticity, like the size of that gap ends up leading to maybe an accelerated jadedness from an expectation to a reality perspective with folks that causes these, as my friend Ellen calls them, these like ethical refugees who leave a company because they like bought into it and then they leave it, and because they get chewed up and spit out by it, and then they're coming into a new company with this like carapace on, or this, this callousness, because they don't believe that that could even exist anymore. So
Right.
I'm just kind of, throwing some things out there, like how do we not let this like potential for like outsized jadedness in the face of like greenwashed or like inauthentic, conveyance of values that don't correspond to the experiences that folks have, prevent us from achieving this, I don't want to call it a utopia, but like this new era of like ethics forward companies that I think we can achieve if we do it right.
Yeah. I mean, the one point you said before I go to the
Yeah.
corporate culture thing was about your dad's quote about if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. Something I tell my kids, all four of them, is, the secret to life you can fit in the palm of your hand. Fun, funny, cool, nice, happy, real. And if you just take those five concepts and
That's
put them
pretty
into
good.
practice, fun, funny, cool, nice, happy, real. If you can do that, you're living a good life, happy, and there's a lot of depth to each of those concepts. But on a simple surface, that's that's all you need. Like, grasp that in your hand and go with it. Like, that's going to work. It's not going to lead you astray. Those five core concepts. Of course, we could talk a whole hour about them,
Yeah.
but that's what I teach them about how to approach life. And you ask about this gulf, this gap, and what it comes down to, and you talk about it at your company, is getting people to care,
Right.
like genuine caring, like caring for your fellow human being, regardless of the color of their skin or their sex or their age or any of those things. Like, we're all human beings.
Right.
You and I are more similar than,
Right.
we're 99.99999% the same thing. So is the person, at my house next door. Compared to anything in the universe, we're the same thing.
Right.
Like, what's so hard to grasp about we're all in this together? Like, let's work together. I think the cooperation, which is, competition, cooperation, those are put at different ends of the spectrum, and it's hard to really grasp, cooperation and what we can accomplish if we work together. It doesn't mean you have to give up your profits and give up, competing with any of
Yeah.
those.
Right.
Just means that, like, overall, you need to have a higher purpose, something you're heading toward collectively to make the world better, and then make your and make your profits, and help your there's gotta be a higher goal than simply making profits for shareholders, period. That's not gonna lead to a more ideal world.
Right.
It's gonna lead to what we're seeing, I think, in today's world. So the key to that gap is authenticity, integrity. We talked about it earlier, having those various roles and how when I'm doing this, that, being the same person consistently in all your endeavors, authentic integrity, realizing the value of ethics in a business context, realizing why it benefits you and others. If leadership, which is always the key, can grasp that and then put it into practice, then we can change the way that businesses operate.
I think that's totally spot on. Earlier this week, there was a massive tech layoff from a big company. I'm sure you've heard about it. And this was a company that really had pushed forward this vibe of a lot of what you're talking about, right? They had, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I forget what the word was for it, but it's a culture of caring and it's all these kinds of things. And I've been on a bunch of these boards of folks, kind of who've gotten laid off by the company, and the vitriol and the I don't know, it's what's the word? It's like a like they've just been so let down. Like, they thought it was this thing and it ended up being this other thing. They thought they were part of this, this really special culture and blah blah blah, and they got chewed up and spit out just like everybody else in every other company.
Right.
How do we think about that? How do we navigate through that? And what would you tell someone who is on the brunt end of that, who they may have gotten, I don't know, they got a severance package or whatever, but they're still kind of SOL?
Yeah, and I would say, I talked about it a little bit earlier about life being a learning experience,
Mm-hmm.
and the world's the teacher, and you're the student. Life has all kinds of hard things that happen. We get knocked flat. There's so many difficult things. The point is, how do you learn from that and then educate yourself to move forward in a better way? So, take those experiences. They're out of your control. You can control how you feel and how you adopt and where you focus your attention. You have control over certain things. This is what I tell my classes is like, you know, when I played basketball, it was pretty decent. And I cared. I practiced and did well. I could control how I practiced and my hook shots and rebounding and all that stuff. I couldn't control the outcome of the game. That's
Right.
just way too many factors. If you focus on what you can control yourself, then you can change how you approach the world. And those hardships that happen, they're not right, they're not fair, they're not just, but they occur in life. And so the thing I would advise anyone that has some hardship in life is to take it, analyze it, digest it, and figure out how can you learn from that experience to then go out and do something better. So the jadedness and that feeling of and that doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve you well to feel that way. What serves you well is to go, man, that was unfair. That was not cool. Let me see what went down. Okay, so now what how do I learn to approach the future, in a different way and learn from the fact that these people, acted in improper
Yeah.
and unethical ways.
There's this movement of like there's this bring your whole self to work movement, which I think I'll use as a shorthand for this sort of culture forward type of an approach to running a business. And what I've seen recently, there is a couple of a handful of like ethics folks that I follow who are thought leaders, and they put out good information and good articles and stuff like that. It's almost like a jadedness that's come along with that due to the types of headlines that we've seen this week repeating over and over and over again. This is not like the first time. This is just one of added to the freaking list of these types of things. And like obviously I'm using layoffs here as sort of a shorthand for this sort of like contradiction or the hypocrisy. There's this great book that I love called Everybody Matters, and it's written by a guy named Bob Chapman, and he ran Barry Waymiller, which was a manufacturing company, and they navigated through the last financial crisis without letting anybody go, and they did it with a bunch of like culture forward things. Everyone kind of threw in together. It's really one of my favorite books about really kind of, I don't want to say weaponizing it because that makes it sound like inauthentic, but like utilizing it and creating a true culture that people can stand on. And Gary Decker's another guy who built a phenomenal culture at WD-40 that had all those positive externalities that ended up showing up into the stock price and so forth. But in spite of that, it seems like a lot of people like to try to shortcut their way to it. And it's causing like a general kind of jadedness among ethicists, which I think might be kind of a canary in the coal mine that might make this movement not end up being what it is. I don't know. Any thoughts on what I just said?
Yeah, I mean, that lack of, putting ethics into practice and really meaning it, and you point out some examples that it's possible. I mean, one statement is, what you believe, you perceive, So if you believe, and, I've looked at your material about your company, you believe that ethics, instead of being a cost sink, can be a lever to, make your business better. You believe that and you perceive that, it takes a mindset shift.
Right.
If people focus on, like we said, the internet allows the wisdom traditions to be available. It allows all the negativity to be available.
Right.
They're both there. Where do you choose to focus your attention? That's on you. It's always on you. And people, it's easier, it's easier to get caught in the system and the norm and just let all this negativity fly. But there's examples of people doing the right thing, doing it well, and seeing it through. So my advice would be to focus, exemplars. Positive psychology is something I talk about in my text. And, this is a story that will make some sense. Take the science of psychology. It studied human beings and it put them on a scale, from the normal person is a 0, and we've got all these -10s, -9, and 8, -7s. Let's bring them back up to 0. Well, positive psychology came about in the last few decades, and it said, well, forget about the 0. What about these +10s over here, these exemplars? Look at these human beings who have lived phenomenal lives. How do we get -9s or 0s to +10s? How do we get over there? And it's all a matter of the belief about where you focus your attention. And once you see those exemplars, they did it. And if they did it, so can you. And that's the point. That's why I try to empower people to realize what they can accomplish in life is sky's the limit.
Totally.
But you have to put your effort into it, and you have to care, and you have to give it, your energy. And if you don't,
You're going to get what you get. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, you're going to be in the system, just floating around, being part of the norm.
Right.
Like, is that what you want in life? And for many people, they don't think beyond that.
Right.
But there's no reason not to. And it's a choice. So that empowerment of people to realize exemplars are out there, you can chase them. I think that's kind of the response to what you're laying out there. Like, look around you, see the good that exists, and then put it inside, figure out how to do it for yourself and then
Right.
spread it.
Right.
That's the simple solution.
Yeah, that's a good solution. How are you doing on time? Because I have another question, or we can wrap up.
I've got plenty of time.
Okay, good. So I love your Plato's Cave thing, and I think it's a cool way that you've brought. I'm going to kind of botch this, I'm sure, but like you're bringing, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you see these same hierarchies in systems and in philosophy, in psychology, and I think you kind of use this as an anchor point to, show that.
Yes.
Walk us through that at a high level, please, because I think it's a really smart kind of synthesis of these different concepts. I think it brings it together in a tangible way.
Thank you again for your kind words. That means a lot to me, and it's a lot of effort to come up with these
I'm sure.
thoughts and put them together.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but the anchor of this whole text is Plato's cave. It's Plato and his teaching, and Plato's cave. Maybe people aren't familiar with it, but I read it at Davidson, and lots of people read it in college. But it's about the nature of education, which sounds like, okay, the nature of education. That's what Plato says it's about. What does that mean? That means, like I told you earlier, he's trying to show you that life is about how you educate yourself. How do you live an ideal life? That's what he's trying to demonstrate with Plato's cave. So to live an ideal life, you have to educate yourself, okay? And that's the point. I mean, that's why it's the cave's the nature of education. And he talks about, should I go through the
Yeah. Do it.
story and talk about it? He talks about the fact that human beings were all chained in a cave looking at a wall. And on that wall are shadows dancing about. Those shadows are created by objects that are behind us on this platform. And that platform is being carried by people who are hidden under a stage. And then there's a fire behind that shines its light on those 2D objects that create the shadows we see. And each of these things he talks about are different stages, different levels that you can work yourself through. He talks also about going beyond that fire to seeing that there's sunlight streaming in through the cave. And if you follow that, you get out to the world of nature, where you have real objects, three-dimensional people and horses and animals and water and all that stuff out there as well. And ultimately, he points to the sun as the source of life. That's what allows the cave to exist. That's what allows you to exist, all this other stuff. So in his allegory, he's talking about the 7 levels of development of consciousness, is what I call it. 7 levels of moving yourself up to seeing the world in a different way. It turns out those 7 levels he talks about are correlated with positive psychology and the work of Lawrence Kohlberg, who talked about 7 levels of moral development, and people going through each of those to get to a higher state of living a good life. And in addition to that, is correlated with Russell Ackoff's systems thinking, which talks about going from data to information to knowledge to a system to the principles that operate in that system to wisdom and to the truth of the system itself. 7 levels in all these different areas, and those things are in this book are put together in a triangle so you can see the correlation between them, and it demonstrates. The point is to demonstrate in a symbol, in something you can fit in the palm of your hand or on your shirt, how to live a good life, how to be ethical, how to enjoy your life experience. And this is accomplished by putting the concepts that are on that little diagram into practice and realizing that, you start out at a stage based on fear. We're all operating on a base of fear. That's the first level. You move from that up to a stage of desires, where your desires and your attention are focused on things. Beyond that, you move to a level where your beliefs, you want to have common beliefs with your allies. So you solidify with a small group of people. Beyond that, at stage 4, you're looking at society as itself. I'm an American, this is the society I find myself in.
Mm-hmm.
Stage 5 is where things really take off. And that's where you're looking at the principles, these invisible concepts that actually undergird the system. It's not no longer a physical system you're thinking about, but you're going beyond to these principles. And stage 6 is wisdom, which is that's the important part of the book. After the semicolon, it's the practical guide to wisdom, trying to show you conscious ethics how to achieve wisdom. That's a pretty remarkable thing.
Right.
And wisdom can be understood in a few different ways. It can be understood as understanding the proper relationship among all things, how things relate to each other, what is truly worth value in your life, And that's the thing, is most people think they find value in monetary acquisitions or materialism. That's not value. That's not valuable. What's truly valuable is to put these virtues that he talks about into practice and experience a good life. As you talked about, how much more enjoyable is it to have fun with your job, to enjoy what you do, to that blows away
Right.
making a lot of money and hating every second of what you're doing. So
Well, it
it's
goes
a
back to what you were saying about the basketball game. There's such a complex set of factors that determine the outcome of that game. You focusing on that outcome beyond focusing on what you can actually do, that leads to a bunch of terrible situations, right? Like that's not a fun game anymore. I'm saying
yeah.
that there's wisdom in knowing what you can affect and what you can't affect.
Yes, wisdom. And, there's a lot of philosophy in that book about stoicism and, Plato's gave, but stoics are the ones who they learn from Plato, that you focus on what you can control in life. That's the key. What can
Mhm.
I control? And those are the internal factors. You can't control all these external things, which doesn't mean you don't try. It just means you don't attach to them. You
Mm.
don't give your feelings away to the outcome of a
Or
basketball
you don't
game.
put your identity in that
Yes.
achievement or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Identity is the key to life. Most people identify, "Oh, I'm a professor," or "I graduated from UVA law," or all these identifications. No, no, no. I mean, at your core, we're all the same. That's what the whole point is.
Right.
Like, we're all this consciousness or whatever you wanna put in the center. We're all the same. Strip all that stuff away. And so if you identify with that, no longer are you trying to do these material acquisitions. You're trying to make the world a better place for everyone else that's in the same boat as you. And it feels good, and good things come to those type of people. And that's kind of the point of writing this text.
That was a great summary.
Well, thank
See, I
you.
knew this. I knew this was going to be a good one. Real quick, let's just talk a little bit about. You have two big chapters. I also love the symmetry of your chapter titles. I'm sure
Thank
that
you
was
so
done on
much.
purpose,
Yeah.
but that is really cool.
Yes, yes,
Um,
it was done on purpose, and it's hard to notice, I guess, but you're astute. You got it. Yeah.
well, you're a very intentional guy, and I know I can just in looking at the book, there's just so much thought that went into it, and it's not easy to make those connections. And I just kind of reflecting back on your young mind at Davidson and this liberal arts college, kind of making all these connections from these different things. It kind of was a muscle that you've probably developed over time, because not everyone can do that. Look at five
Yeah.
different sort of frameworks and say, oh, look at these similarities. So I think it's very unique, and I think it's very smart. But let's talk about
Thank you.
you have these two chapters in the middle: business ethics from a normative and from a descriptive perspective. Give us the
Yeah.
rundown of that dichotomy, or those two different sort of fields.
Yeah, great. So most people in business don't care about this stuff. This is the theory that they teach. The normative theories of business ethics. You've got the primary one is utilitarianism, which I equate to the outside world. I mean, it's your cost benefit analysis. It's the greatest good for the greatest number is the simplest way of stating that. So your focus when it comes to utilitarianism, which is the primary way businesses operate in this world,
Yeah.
is the primary focus is on the consequences of your action. You're looking at the consequences, okay? Doesn't matter how you get there, the ends justify the means. It can lead to some pretty uncool ways of living life or doing business. But the meaning of utilitarianism in its simplest form is the greatest good for the greatest number, that consequence. But many businesses mess with that and they change it to the greatest amount of money for the greatest number of shareholders or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not necessarily nefarious. Those are easy to measure. How do you measure good for
Yeah. Right.
everyone, right? But I can measure money for shareholders, so
And I'll
that's what
just
I'm
use
gonna
that
do.
as a proxy for good.
Absolutely,
Yep.
and it's not a proxy, but that's you can understand, right? So that's utilitarianism. On the other side of the triangle, you've got deontology, which is a focus on an individual's actions and intentions. What do you intend to accomplish? Intention, and attention are two of the most vital concepts in the world. If you can understand what someone's intention is and where they focus their attention, you're going to figure out a great deal about that person. So deontology focuses on, what intention you bring into a situation and what actions you take. So it's not looking at the consequences like utilitarianism is. It's looking at the actions you take and assessing whether you should take that action or not. So they both look at a different component to assess what's ethical. That's why they get to different answers. And at the bottom of this triangle, you've got virtue ethics, which is and philosophy, which is, these six principles. I mean, there's six principles: moderation, courage, justice, wisdom, humanity, and transcendence. Six concepts. And these came from Plato originally, at least 4 of them, maybe 5. And then positive psychology picked them up and talked about this is how you live a good life. This is
Yeah.
how you do it. So it's supported by science. But just putting those 6 things into practice is, from a virtue ethic perspective, is what's going to lead to the good life. So those are the 3 angles of normative business ethics, which is, again, normative is how you ought to live your life, how you should choose to live. And those 3 things give different answers. But the ultimate answer they give is all the same. It's about good. It's about doing good with your
Hmm.
actions, about being good with virtue ethics, or creating good with utilitarianism. It all comes back to good, even though they say different ways of going about it, they're saying the same thing, just
Right.
different ways of measuring it. That's deontology. On the descriptive side of business ethics, this is where I talk about the 3 different approaches. For utilitarianism, I'll do it in the same order. For utilitarianism, my focus, or it aligns with Russell Lakoff's systems thinking, and moving from data to information to knowledge to a system to principles to wisdom to the truth. Those are stages of development that people go through to understand how a system works. On the side of deontology, that interior, you've got Kohlberg's and his 7 levels of moral development. And I went through those a little earlier, talking about
Yep.
fear, desire, and you move your way up to the highest level, which I think he termed something like cosmic consciousness or something at the top. And that's the highest level to operate from. And then at the bottom, you've got virtue ethics and philosophy, which is Plato's cave, and those 7 stages that he went through to achieve the good, true, and beautiful life. And I didn't talk about those, but the 3 transcendentals, good, truth, and beauty, that's the ideal toward which each of these 3 different approaches head, and what you can experience if you put those into practice appropriately.
So that's the book. Okay, no, I'm kidding. I mean, it's so cool. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour on this.
We could do it again if you want. I'd love it.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting and fun to talk to you, an engaged individual that knows this stuff. It's fantastic.
Well, thanks,
And
man.
yeah, and the whole point of this book is to get it into practice. I
Right.
do it with my students, and I've started to do it with consulting and things like that. But the more businesses that can realize the value of this and what it means, and see a little symbol that illustrates how to put it into practice, that's pretty phenomenal. And I'll just say the last thing about this model I created. I call it the game of life, and how you choose to engage life. And at the center is, your consciousness. Like, you are the center of your conscious experience, is how I explain it. And there's only 3 things you can ever do at any point in space and time. You can either think, you can sense, or you can feel. Those are the only 3 things that you can ever do at any point in time. So those 3 things correlate with your mind thinks, your body senses, and your heart feels.
Mm.
So this whole system I've created is designed to make your body, mind, and heart as ideal as possible, so that you can have that ideal life experience. So it all makes sense, and it all ties together, and it's very thought through. And if you read it, and I'm happy to communicate with anybody that wants to talk about it, to put it into practice will change your life. And not
Hmm.
only that, it'll change the lives of those around.
Yeah, and that's how we can start to really use the potential that business can have to be a positive force in the world. And you see little
Absolutely.
flashes of it and pockets of it. And I guess what I would say is, even if you're at one of these big companies, or even if you think you can't turn the whole cruise ship that you're on, you can make your part of the galley clean. And you
Yes.
can live this out around you, and you can be a little shining light in the darkness. And what that's going to do is maybe turn on the lights of other folks who have been jaded or don't think it can happen. And you have to, just to take that Gandhi quote, you got to be that change that you want to see in the world. But to do that, you have to change. You have to do something different. But
Yeah, you
it's such a
can't.
fun it's a fun battle, I guess. It's a fun opportunity, because the status quo is not fun.
No, the status quo is going to have to change. I mean, evolution occurs, right? Look back a million years. Look at all the development that's happened of life. Things are the only thing, the only constant in life is change.
Right.
Change is always going to occur. Physical things are going to fall apart. I mean, that's how it works. And Plato would say the only thing that doesn't change are these principles, these virtues, these constants, these ideas.
The sun.
Justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the justice was in practice back in Rome and Greece, and the concept of justice is present today.
Hmm.
Are the Roman Empire, the Greek, those things aren't around
Right.
anymore, but the concept of justice is. So those things that are perennial, that's what you need to grab a hold of and put into practice because it's not going anywhere. And that's what can lead to your better life experience.
Yeah. Well, this was a lot of fun, man. This is
It
a real
was. It was.
blast. I appreciate you coming on the Ethics Experts. Your book can be found on Amazon and probably everywhere else that books are sold. It's a phenomenal book. Great job writing it. Really, I don't know. Like I said, I'm lucky that I get to talk to people that are innovators in their field and are do deep dives on stuff that I'm happy to nerd out on. So this is a blast. Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me at my first and last name.com, wadechumney.com, WADECHUMNEY.com. And you can email me at wade@wadechumney.com. And I've got some, you can get a free chapter from the book. You can get some other material from me if you reach out there. And an app for the book just came out.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday.
I forgot to talk about the app.
That's all right.
So tell us about the app.
Yeah. It just came out. And it's about yesterday, in fact, and it's about putting this book, these concepts that are about into practice in an organizational setting. Mm-hmm. So it goes through some exercises and some ways that you can make this a reality in any organization.
Yeah. So it's very cool. It's a very cool app. It's a great book.
And if you reach out to me, I can give away some free apps if you have a desire.
Cool.
Like the first 15 people that email, I've got some codes that they sent me. So.
All right.
Something to think about.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, man. Love your work. And everyone, until next time.